Royal Guard stops Camilla's son after he grabs Prince George's arm too hard. She imagined herself walking among tourists, taking pictures, and perhaps even glimpsing a real royal family member. That morning, Charlotte woke up early, her excitement buzzing through her veins. The sun was just rising, painting the city in warm shades of gold, and she could hardly wait to get to the palace area. She carefully packed her bag, making sure she had her camera, a water bottle, and a small notebook where she loved to write short observations of her trips. Her parents had wished her luck, telling her to be careful, but also encouraging her to enjoy the experience. Charlotte smiled, promising herself to stay alert and soak in every moment. As she stepped outside, the streets were already alive with the sounds of morning traffic, street vendors calling out their goods, and the laughter of children playing nearby. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if the city itself knew something special was about to happen. When Charlotte arrived at the royal grounds, she was greeted by a sea of visitors. People from all walks of life had come to see the palace, its gardens, and the famous ceremonial guards. The walls were tall and white, with golden embellishments that reflected the morning sun, making the entire place shimmer. Charlotte's heart raced with excitement. She joined the line for the van tour, a small vehicle that would take visitors around the royal area, showing them spots that were otherwise difficult to reach on foot. The van arrived, a sleek white vehicle with tinted windows. Charlotte took a deep breath and climbed in, choosing a seat near the window. She liked to observe the world outside, capturing little details that others might overlook. The van's interior smelled faintly of leather and air freshener, and the hum of the engine was oddly comforting. For a few minutes, everything seemed normal. People chatted about the history of the palace, the guards, and the beautiful gardens they were about to see. Charlotte joined in, asking questions and smiling at the guide's stories. But soon, she noticed something slightly off. The driver seemed distracted, his eyes occasionally flicking to a phone mounted near the dashboard. He didn't speak much, and the way his hands gripped the wheel was tense. Charlotte tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself it was just nerves from being on a new tour. She focused on the gardens outside, noticing the perfectly trimmed hedges, the fountains, and the marble statues that seemed to tell their own stories. She clicked a few pictures, hoping to capture the grandeur of the place. As the van drove further into the royal grounds, Charlotte's unease grew. The streets were narrower here and fewer tourists were around. The hum of the engine felt louder, almost like it was echoing her own heartbeat. She glanced around, noticing the quiet and the few security cameras perched high above the gates. Something about the van, the driver, and the area made her feel vulnerable. Her hands tightened around her camera, and she realized she hadn't seen anyone checking tickets or IDs at the last checkpoint. A small voice in her mind whispered caution, telling her to pay attention. Charlotte tried to speak to the people around her, asking casually if they had noticed anything unusual, but most were engrossed in their phones or in conversation. She decided to stay calm and observe silently. She moved her seat slightly, hoping to get a better view of the driver and the road ahead. That's when she realized that the van's windows, though tinted, didn't offer the perfect view inside from the outside. Anyone passing by would see her face, but might not know if she was in distress. Her mind raced as she thought about the options she had if something went wrong. The guide's voice, calm and cheerful, talked about the history of the palace and the ceremonial duties of the royal guards. Charlotte listened, nodding occasionally, but her mind kept returning to the small nagging feeling in her chest. She noticed that the driver's eyes had a strange focus, not on the road but somewhere beyond it. She couldn't explain why, but every instinct she had told her to stay alert. She tried to think of this as her imagination playing tricks, but deep down, she knew something felt unusual. Charlotte's thoughts drifted to her parents. They had always told her to trust her instincts and to ask for help if she ever felt unsafe. She wished she had spoken up earlier, but the situation had seemed normal at first. Now, trapped in the van with the doors locked, she felt a mix of fear and determination. She knew she had to be clever if anything went wrong. Her eyes scanned the van for anything she could use to signal someone outside. She noticed the tinted window and realized that though it hid the inside, it also allowed her to make small gestures that might be noticed. She tried to remain calm, practicing deep breaths and focusing on small details around her. She noticed a security guard walking nearby outside, patrolling the grounds. A tiny flicker of hope sparked in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, she could get someone's attention without causing a panic inside the van. Charlotte began to think about how she could silently communicate her distress if the situation escalated. She remembered reading about silent signals for help and realized she could mouth words and gestures. As the van continued to move, Charlotte felt a strange mix of fear and courage. She reminded herself that staying calm was the first step. She imagined telling her story later, how she had sensed danger and taken action before it was too late. Her mind worked quickly, planning possible scenarios and thinking of the best ways to make sure someone noticed if she needed help. She didn't want to panic, but she couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling that had been growing since she got into the van. Charlotte's observation skills, honed from years of careful attention to detail, became her ally. She noticed small things about the van's interior, the driver's posture, and the slight reflections on the tinted windows. Every little detail mattered, and she tried to keep track of them all. She watched the path outside, looking for familiar landmarks or points where she could signal for help if needed. Her heart beat faster, but her mind remained sharp. She knew that panic could make her situation worse. As the van rounded a corner, the streets became even quieter. The sounds of the city faded, replaced by the faint rustle of leaves and distant birdsong. Charlotte realized that if she didn't act soon, it might be too late to catch someone's attention. She shifted her gaze to the nearest road, scanning for anyone who looked like a guard, a passerby, or a helper. Her instincts sharpened, her senses heightened. She understood that she had to prepare for any sudden turn of events, even if nothing happened immediately. Despite the growing tension, Charlotte kept her composure. She tried to engage with the other passengers, asking light questions and keeping the atmosphere normal. She didn't want to alarm anyone unnecessarily, but her inner alertness never wavered. Her eyes constantly returned to the driver, the doors, and the windows, calculating every possibility. Charlotte knew she had to be ready for action if needed, and her careful preparation would be her strength. The van slowed slightly as it approached a less crowded area. Charlotte noticed a slight hesitation in the driver's movements, a subtle pause that didn't fit the pattern of a normal tour. Her heart skipped a beat. She realized that this was her moment to act if anything went wrong. She studied the outside environment, identifying potential points of help, a patrolling guard, a tourist walking nearby, or a shop with open doors. Her mind worked like a chessboard, planning multiple moves ahead to ensure she could signal someone effectively. Even as fear crept into her chest, Charlotte found a strange sense of determination. She knew that her careful observation and quick thinking could make the difference between staying safe and being in danger. She adjusted her posture, readying herself to take action if needed, while keeping her face calm and composed for anyone who might notice. Charlotte's courage and alertness became her silent shield, giving her the strength to face whatever might come next on this seemingly ordinary tour. Charlotte felt the van moving into a quieter part of the royal grounds. The streets here were narrower, lined with tall hedges and ornamental walls. Fewer tourists were in sight, and the cheerful sounds of chatter and laughter seemed to fade behind her. A subtle unease crept up her spine. Though nothing had happened yet, the sudden quiet made her heart race. She kept her eyes on the driver, who now seemed even more focused on the road ahead than before. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles white, and he occasionally glanced at the rearview mirror as if checking for something or someone. Charlotte wasn't sure what worried her more, the van being so empty or the tension radiating from the driver. She tried to focus on something familiar, anything that could keep her mind calm. She looked out the window at the statues and fountains, the trees swaying gently in the breeze and the birds hopping between the branches. For a moment, it almost felt like a normal tour. But then her eyes caught a flash of movement outside, a lone security guard patrolling along a distant path. Charlotte's pulse quickened. She realized that if she needed help, that guard might be her only hope. Her mind started racing with scenarios, each one playing out like a scene from a movie. What if the van stopped in an isolated area? What if the driver ignored her attempts to signal? Charlotte knew she had to act cautiously, but she also understood that time was slipping away. She needed a plan, something simple and visible that could alert someone without putting herself in immediate danger. Her heart pounded as she considered the safest way to get attention. Charlotte remembered reading about silent signals for help in crowded or confined spaces. Even if someone didn't hear her voice, they could see gestures, facial expressions, or small movements that suggested distress. She leaned slightly closer to the window, making sure her face was clearly visible through the tinted glass. Her eyes widened and she took a deep breath, trying to make her fear look like curiosity. Then, with careful precision, she parted her lips slightly and mouthed the words, "Help me." At first, it felt strange, almost embarrassing. She wondered if anyone outside would even notice. But then she saw the security guard from earlier glance up, his eyes narrowing as if he sensed something unusual. Her heart leapt. She continued mouthing the words, slowly and deliberately, hoping the guard could read them. Her hands pressed lightly against the glass for emphasis, and she shifted her body so she was fully visible. Inside the van, the other passengers were still chatting or staring out their own windows, unaware of Charlotte's silent plea. The guide continued speaking about the royal gardens, his voice cheerful and uninterrupted. Charlotte didn't want to alarm anyone unnecessarily, but she needed to stay focused. Every second counted. She knew that the more visible and consistent her signals were, the higher the chance that someone would act quickly. The guard outside took a few steps closer to the van. Charlotte's heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. She tried not to make sudden movements that could startle the driver, who still seemed tense and unaware of what Charlotte was trying to communicate. She practiced slow, deliberate gestures, pointing subtly toward herself and then toward the van doors, trying to convey that she needed help without shouting or drawing unnecessary attention. As the van rounded another corner, Charlotte noticed a small group of tourists walking along the main path. She considered trying to signal them too, but the tinted windows made it harder for anyone at a distance to see her clearly. She focused on the security guard, who now seemed to be paying full attention to the van. Every flicker of hope made her more determined. She reminded herself to breathe slowly and keep her movements controlled. Panicking now could ruin all her efforts. Minutes felt like hours as Charlotte continued her silent communication. She noticed tiny details around her that might help. A reflection on the tinted window allowed her to see the approaching guard without making it obvious to the driver. She could see the glint of the guard's badge, the careful way he walked, scanning the area. Charlotte felt a small surge of relief. Someone had noticed. But she also knew that noticing was only the first step. Action was what truly mattered. Charlotte's mind raced with possibilities. What if the driver suddenly stopped or made a sudden turn into a secluded area? She had to stay alert for every movement, every gesture, and every change in the driver's behavior. She adjusted her position slightly, keeping her eyes on both the guard and the road ahead. Her pulse quickened, but her face remained calm. She knew that projecting calmness would help the guard understand that something was wrong without alarming the other passengers. The guard, now fully aware of Charlotte's signals, started moving faster along the path, keeping the van in sight. Charlotte could feel her heart pounding harder, a mix of fear and gratitude washing over her. She mouthed the words again, slower this time, emphasizing the urgency. Her hands pressed lightly against the glass, creating a small, visible mark that highlighted her movements. She hoped the guard would understand exactly what she needed without delay. Inside the van, the driver's tension seemed to increase. He occasionally glanced at Charlotte, noticing her unusual focus, but not understanding what it meant. Charlotte realized she couldn't afford to make any sudden movements that might provoke him. She had to stay calm, controlled, and precise. Every gesture had to convey the right message. Her training and observation, something she had practiced in small ways throughout her life, was now proving invaluable. As the van moved further into a narrow alley between two garden walls, Charlotte's fear heightened. The space felt enclosed, almost like a tunnel, with limited visibility to anyone outside. She knew she had to intensify her signals to ensure the guard could act quickly. She widened her eyes and mouthed the words, "Help me," again, more deliberately this time. Her fingers traced subtle patterns on the glass, small motions designed to catch attention without alarming the driver. The guard outside reacted immediately. He started scanning the surroundings, looking for the best approach to reach the van safely. Charlotte felt a surge of hope. Someone was taking her signals seriously. She reminded herself not to panic, to stay calm, and to be ready for any sudden movement. The van slowed slightly, and Charlotte realized that the guard was preparing to intervene. Her heart raced with anticipation, and she focused entirely on maintaining her silent communication. Charlotte's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. She considered every possible outcome, every potential obstacle. But through it all, she stayed focused on one goal: to get help without putting herself in further danger. Her breathing remained steady, and her gestures became more confident. She could see the guard positioning himself strategically, ready to act. The tension inside the van was palpable, though the other passengers remained blissfully unaware. As the van continued along the path, Charlotte's eyes never left the guard. She mouthed the words one final time, slow and deliberate, hoping to convey the urgency. Her hands pressed firmly against the glass, and she leaned slightly forward to ensure full visibility. She felt a strange mix of fear, determination, and relief. Someone had noticed, and now it was only a matter of time before help arrived. Suddenly, the driver slowed the van even more, and Charlotte saw the guard sprint toward the vehicle. Her heart leapt, and a small tear of relief ran down her cheek. She continued to signal, guiding the guard's attention to her exact location. She could feel the tension inside the van, the tight grip of fear, but she remained composed, knowing that the guard was now fully aware of the situation. The van stopped briefly near a small open space, and Charlotte realized that the guard was preparing to act decisively. She could see the determination in his movements, the confidence that came from knowing he had spotted someone in distress. Her silent plea had worked. The guard's eyes met hers, and in that brief moment, she felt a sense of reassurance that she would soon be safe. As the guard approached, Charlotte's mind began to calm slightly, though the adrenaline still surged through her veins. She had successfully communicated her need for help without making a sound, relying entirely on gestures, expressions, and subtle movements. The tension of the past few minutes began to shift toward hope. She knew that the guard was now in control of the situation, and that her courage and careful observation had made the difference. Charlotte's silent signals had worked, but she remained alert. She understood that the situation was not over yet, and that she needed to stay aware of every detail until she was completely safe. Her hands rested lightly on the glass, and she maintained eye contact with the guard, ready for the next step. The van's quiet hum continued, but now it felt different, a hum filled with anticipation rather than uncertainty. The guard was almost at the van now, moving swiftly and decisively. Charlotte's pulse raced, and she felt a mix of fear, relief, and gratitude. She had relied entirely on her instincts and observation skills to alert someone, and it had worked. The next moments would determine her safety, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of confidence. Help was here, and she would soon be free from the tense situation inside the van. Charlotte's heart was pounding so fast that she could feel it in her throat. The van had slowed almost to a stop, and she could see the guard sprinting toward the vehicle with determined urgency. Every second felt stretched, like time had slowed, but Charlotte knew that help was finally within reach. Her hands pressed lightly against the glass, and she kept her eyes locked on the guard, silently urging him to move faster. She could almost feel the safety that was coming closer with each step he took. Inside the van, the other passengers remained mostly unaware. They chatted quietly among themselves, some scrolling on their phones, others looking out the windows at the gardens. The guide continued his narration, describing the intricate designs of the palace gates and the history behind each statue. No one seemed to notice the tension that Charlotte had felt for so long, and she was grateful for the normalcy of their behavior. It meant that any sudden action from her or the guard wouldn't alarm the others too much. Charlotte took a deep, steadying breath. She knew that the next moments would be crucial. The guard was almost at the van now, and she could see the concentration etched across his face. He scanned the surroundings quickly, ensuring there were no obstacles or potential dangers that could delay his intervention. Charlotte could sense his readiness, his confidence that he would act decisively to protect her. She felt a surge of hope. Finally, relief was near. She mouthed the words, "Help me," one last time, her eyes wide and desperate. Her hands traced a small circle on the glass, a clear signal of urgency. The guard's eyes caught every movement, and he nodded almost imperceptibly to himself, confirming that he had understood. Charlotte's pulse was still racing, but her focus sharpened. She knew she had to remain calm and follow every cue from the guard until she was fully safe. The guard approached the van carefully, assessing the situation in an instant. He noticed the driver's posture, tense, confused, and seemingly unaware that anyone had noticed Charlotte's distress. The guard understood that quick and decisive action was necessary. There was no time for hesitation. His training, experience, and instinct took over, guiding him toward the most effective way to reach Charlotte safely. Charlotte felt her heart skip a beat as she watched him lift his arm. She realized that he was about to break the glass. The moment was sudden and shocking, yet somehow reassuring. She braced herself for the noise and the movement, covering her face lightly with her hands to protect herself from any falling shards. Her adrenaline surged, and every nerve in her body was alive with anticipation. The guard's hand swung forward, and the window shattered with a sharp, ringing crack. Tiny pieces of glass scattered across the seat and floor, but Charlotte was safe behind her protective posture. The sound echoed through the quiet streets of the royal grounds, and the driver flinched, startled by the sudden intrusion. Charlotte's eyes met the guard's, and she felt a rush of gratitude. He had arrived just in time, and now she could finally breathe a little easier. The guard quickly reached through the broken window, pulling the door open and helping Charlotte climb out. She felt her legs tremble, but the rush of relief was overwhelming. The guard guided her to a safe distance, keeping his eyes on the van and the driver. Charlotte could see the tension in the driver's face, the confusion as he realized that his plan, whatever it may have been, had been interrupted. The guard's presence was commanding, protective, and Charlotte felt a wave of reassurance wash over her. Once safely outside, Charlotte took a moment to steady herself. She inhaled deeply, feeling the fresh air fill her lungs. The sense of confinement and fear that had gripped her moments ago began to fade, replaced by relief and gratitude. She glanced at the guard, noticing the professionalism and focus that had allowed him to act so decisively. Charlotte knew she owed her safety to his quick thinking and bravery. The other passengers were now noticing the commotion. Some gasped in surprise, while others stared wide-eyed at the shattered window. The guide finally paused, realizing that something serious had occurred. Charlotte quickly explained in a calm, clear voice that she had felt unsafe and needed help. The guard remained vigilant, ensuring that no one approached the van until authorities arrived. His steady presence continued to reassure Charlotte and the other passengers that the situation was under control. Charlotte's mind was still racing as she processed everything that had just happened. Her heart rate was gradually slowing, but the adrenaline kept her senses sharp. She realized how close she had come to being in a dangerous situation and how vital her awareness and quick thinking had been. She had relied entirely on observation, patience, and silent communication, and it had worked perfectly in tandem with the guard's decisive action. The driver was now being questioned by another security official who had arrived at the scene. Charlotte observed quietly, still catching her breath. She felt a mixture of emotions, relief, gratitude, and a lingering sense of shock. The guard stayed close to her, making sure she felt safe and protected. Charlotte couldn't stop thinking about how quickly things had escalated and how fortunate she was that help had arrived just in time. As the situation calmed, Charlotte reflected on her own role in her rescue. She had remained observant, alert, and strategic throughout the ordeal. Her silent signals had worked because she had planned carefully and acted deliberately, even under pressure. The guard's action had been the decisive moment, but without her initial awareness and communication, he might never have known to intervene. Charlotte felt a deep appreciation for her instincts and the training that guided the guard's actions. The guard finally escorted Charlotte and the other passengers to a safer location, away from the van and the immediate scene. He checked in to ensure she was unharmed and asked if she needed anything. Charlotte shook her head, still overwhelmed by the experience but grateful for the guard's professionalism and care. She noticed that other visitors and passers-by had started gathering, curious about what had happened, but she remained focused on the safety and resolution of the situation. Charlotte took a moment to breathe deeply and process her emotions. Fear had dominated the earlier part of the van ride, but now it was replaced by a strong sense of relief and empowerment. She realized how crucial situational awareness can be and how quickly circumstances can change. Her silent plea for help had been heard, and decisive action had ensured her safety. Charlotte knew that she would carry this experience with her for the rest of her life, both as a cautionary tale and as a testament to courage and quick thinking. The guard stayed with her until the authorities had fully assessed the situation. Charlotte watched as the van was secured and the driver escorted for questioning. The scene that had seemed so tense moments ago was now under control. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the guard's intervention, knowing that his courage had made all the difference. The shattered window, once a symbol of danger, now stood as a reminder of the bravery and quick action that saved her. Charlotte's thoughts returned to her family. She imagined telling them the story, the fear she had felt, and the incredible heroism of the Royal Guard. She felt a renewed appreciation for the importance of vigilance, preparation, and the ability to act decisively in moments of danger. Charlotte understood that this experience, though frightening, had strengthened her awareness and confidence. She knew that she had learned something invaluable about trust, observation, and courage. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Charlotte remained near the guard, asking questions about his actions and training. She wanted to understand how he had assessed the situation so quickly and why he had chosen to act in the way he did. The guard explained calmly, highlighting the importance of situational awareness, quick judgment, and the readiness to act decisively to protect others. Charlotte listened intently, absorbing every word, grateful for the insight and reassurance he provided. By the time the authorities completed their investigation, Charlotte felt a deep sense of closure. The van was secured, the driver had been addressed, and she was finally safe. She thanked the guard profusely, expressing her gratitude for his courage, professionalism, and quick thinking. The guard nodded with modesty, emphasizing that his duty was to protect visitors like her, and that her awareness had been equally important in ensuring a successful outcome. Charlotte left the scene with a mixture of relief and admiration. She knew that the events of the day would stay with her forever, a story of fear, courage, and rescue that she could share to inspire awareness and vigilance. She reflected on how small, deliberate actions, like her silent plea, could make a profound difference when combined with the decisive actions of someone trained to help. As she walked away from the scene, Charlotte felt a renewed sense of confidence. She knew that while the experience had been terrifying, it had also shown her the strength of careful observation, patience, and courage. The guard's intervention had been heroic, but her own awareness and quick thinking had played an equally vital role. Charlotte vowed to carry these lessons with her, using them to stay alert, prepared, and courageous in any situation she might face in the future. Charlotte stood a safe distance away from the van, still feeling the adrenaline slowly ebb from her body. The Royal Guard remained close, his presence calm and steady, a quiet reassurance that she was finally out of immediate danger. For the first time in what felt like hours, Charlotte allowed herself a small, shaky breath, letting her chest expand fully as the fresh air filled her lungs. The chaos inside the van, the tension, the fear, and the uncertainty, had finally passed, leaving only the raw relief that she had been seen, heard, and rescued. She glanced back at the van, the shattered window catching the sunlight and sending tiny glimmers across the pavement. The glass was scattered, a sharp reminder of how close she had come to a frightening situation. Her mind replayed every moment of the ride, the driver's unusual behavior, the narrow streets, the quiet tension that had grown inside the van. Charlotte realized that without her awareness, without noticing the subtle warning signs, this rescue might not have happened as swiftly. She felt a mixture of gratitude and awe for the guard's quick response, understanding that his training and courage had been just as critical as her own vigilance. The driver of the van was now surrounded by security personnel, speaking with low, hurried voices. He appeared confused, almost stunned, as if the reality of the situation had just begun to sink in. Charlotte watched from a safe distance as one of the officers approached him, gesturing firmly and questioning him carefully. The driver's expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness, but the officers remained calm, professional, and unyielding. They ensured that no further threat remained, securing the van and clearing the area for the other passengers. Charlotte felt a small sense of closure, knowing that the authorities were now handling the situation, allowing her to focus on her own recovery. The other passengers, who had been initially shocked by the broken window and sudden commotion, now gathered near Charlotte. Some looked at her with concern, while others whispered in disbelief about what had happened. "She really did signal for help," one passenger murmured to another, eyes wide. Charlotte smiled faintly, trying to reassure them. She knew they hadn't fully grasped the tension she had experienced inside the van, but she also understood their awe. After all, it was not every day that a silent plea resulted in such swift and decisive action. The royal guard remained at her side, speaking softly, checking to ensure she was unharmed and alert. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone calm yet insistent. Charlotte nodded, though her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline. "I'm fine," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "Thanks to you." The guard shook his head modestly. "It's my duty," he said simply. "But you stayed alert and communicated clearly. That made all the difference." Charlotte nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect and gratitude. She had learned firsthand how teamwork, even silent teamwork, could save lives. As the situation settled, Charlotte began to process the events more fully. She realized that she had been remarkably composed, considering the fear and uncertainty she had felt earlier. Her decision to mouth the words, "Help me," had been deliberate and strategic, a choice rooted in calm observation and careful calculation. She had trusted her instincts, and they had guided her to act in a way that was both subtle and effective. The guard's intervention had been decisive, but her own awareness had made it possible. Charlotte felt a quiet pride in her ability to remain calm under pressure. Authorities continued to handle the driver, who was now being escorted to a secure location for questioning. Charlotte watched as the officers carefully documented the situation, taking notes and photographing the scene. The van's interior, once a place of quiet tension, was now under scrutiny, evidence being collected to ensure that such an incident could be fully understood and prevented in the future. Charlotte felt reassured that the authorities were thorough, taking every precaution to maintain safety for all visitors. As the immediate danger passed, Charlotte allowed herself a few moments to speak with the other passengers. She explained briefly what had happened, describing how she had noticed the driver's unusual behavior, felt uneasy, and silently signaled for help. Her words were calm, measured, and clear, providing context without causing further alarm. The passengers listened intently, some nodding in understanding, others visibly impressed by her quick thinking and composure. Charlotte felt a sense of relief in being able to share her experience, knowing that her story might help others stay alert and prepared in similar situations. The guard stayed near, offering guidance and answering questions. Charlotte asked how he had assessed the situation so quickly, and he explained that training, experience, and observation were critical. "When someone signals distress," he said, "it's important to act decisively but safely. Every situation is different, but the goal is always to protect and de-escalate." Charlotte listened, absorbing his words, understanding that what she had witnessed was a combination of preparation, awareness, and courage. She felt inspired, realizing that everyday vigilance combined with trained professionals could make a profound difference. Charlotte's thoughts drifted to her family, imagining how she would recount this story to them. She pictured their wide eyes, their concern, and eventually their relief and pride. She felt grateful that she had trusted her instincts and acted when she did. The experience had been terrifying, yes, but it had also been empowering. Charlotte realized that moments of fear could reveal unexpected strength and resilience, showing her capabilities she might not have known she possessed. As the scene gradually cleared, Charlotte was escorted by the guard and authorities to a safe waiting area. She sat down, taking a moment to rest and let the adrenaline subside. Her hands no longer trembled as intensely, and her breathing returned to a more steady rhythm. She reflected on the importance of staying aware, observing surroundings carefully, and acting decisively when something felt off. The experience had reinforced lessons she had always believed in, but had never tested so directly in real life. The other passengers began to disperse, some continuing their tour under the guidance of new, reassigned staff, while others simply left the area, still murmuring about the incident. Charlotte remained seated, processing everything that had happened. She thought about the timing, the guard's swift actions, and her own role in signaling for help. She realized that it had been a perfect example of coordination between awareness and action, each complementing the other to ensure safety. Authorities finished documenting the incident, and the van was secured to prevent any further issues. Charlotte observed as the driver was carefully escorted away, ensuring that there would be accountability for the unusual behavior. She felt reassured, understanding that the system had worked, combining vigilance, training, and responsibility. Charlotte's mind reflected on the importance of public safety measures and the value of trained professionals in protecting visitors and civilians. The guard checked in with Charlotte one final time, ensuring that she felt safe enough to continue her day. She smiled faintly, expressing her gratitude once more. "Thank you for everything," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." The guard nodded calmly. "You did everything right," he replied. "Your awareness and clear communication made this easier for me. It's important to recognize your own role in staying safe." Charlotte felt a deep sense of appreciation for his words. It was a humbling reminder that courage and vigilance often work together. As Charlotte finally began to move away from the scene, she reflected on the incident in her mind. She thought about the signs she had noticed early on, the driver's tense behavior, the quiet streets, and the narrowed alleys. She realized that by trusting her instincts and taking careful, deliberate action, she had played an essential role in her own rescue. The guard's bravery had been the decisive moment, but her awareness and preparedness had set the stage. Charlotte felt a renewed confidence in her ability to stay alert and respond effectively in unexpected situations. Charlotte also considered the broader lessons she could take from this experience. She thought about other travelers, other visitors to crowded or unfamiliar places, and how important it was to remain aware and attentive. She resolved to share her story in a way that highlighted the value of observation, caution, and strategic action. By doing so, she hoped to help others recognize the signs of potential danger and take appropriate steps to stay safe. As the day continued, Charlotte felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and empowerment. She had faced a frightening situation, acted decisively, and received timely help from a trained professional. The memory of fear would remain, but it was now accompanied by a strong sense of accomplishment and respect for the guard's heroism. Charlotte understood that both awareness and decisive intervention were essential in ensuring safety, and she felt inspired to carry these lessons forward in her own life. Charlotte walked away from the scene, her mind swirling with a mix of relief, reflection, and lingering. Adrenaline. The sun was higher now, casting warm light over the royal grounds, but the beauty of the place was overshadowed in her mind by the events she had just lived through. Every step she took felt deliberate, as if she were grounding herself in reality after the intense fear and uncertainty she had experienced. The knowledge that she had been saved by the quick action of the royal guard left her with a profound sense of gratitude that she couldn't put into words. As she moved toward a safer area, she noticed small groups of visitors who had gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. Some were curious, others clearly shocked, and a few were observing the guard who had intervened so decisively. Charlotte realized that her ordeal had become a quiet spectacle, drawing attention not for drama, but for the bravery and quick thinking involved. She felt a mix of pride and humility, knowing that her silent plea had been a key part of the story, but that the guard's action had been what ensured her safety. Charlotte found a quiet bench near a small fountain and sat down to catch her breath and collect her thoughts. The adrenaline still lingered, making her fingers tingle and her heart race, but a sense of calm slowly started to return. She reflected on the sequence of events, realizing how quickly the situation had escalated and how every small decision she had made, remaining observant, staying calm, signaling silently, had mattered. She had learned something vital about trust, awareness, and personal courage, lessons that she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Her mind wandered to the royal guard who had saved her. She thought about his bravery, his calm presence, and the quick assessment that had allowed him to intervene at exactly the right moment. Charlotte realized that while training and experience were important, the courage to act decisively in a critical situation was equally essential. She felt a deep respect for him and a sense of reassurance knowing that people like him were there to protect visitors. It was a lesson in both humility and appreciation for those who dedicate their lives to safety. The authorities continued their work, documenting the incident thoroughly. Charlotte watched as the driver was carefully escorted for further questioning. His expression now showed concern and realization of what could have happened. It became clear to her that his plan, whatever it had been, was completely halted by the guard's intervention. Charlotte felt a quiet sense of relief that the situation was fully under control. She knew that proper investigation and accountability would follow, ensuring safety for future visitors. As she sat there, Charlotte noticed a few journalists approaching the area. They had heard of the incident and were eager to understand what had happened. One reporter approached her politely, asking if she would share her story. Charlotte took a deep breath, considering how best to explain the events without sensationalizing them. She described how she had noticed the driver's unusual behavior, how she had felt uneasy, and how she had signaled silently for help. Her words were calm and thoughtful, highlighting the importance of awareness and preparedness. The reporters listened attentively, occasionally taking notes or asking clarifying questions. Charlotte explained that while the guard's intervention had been crucial, her own careful observation had also played a role. She emphasized that being alert, trusting instincts, and knowing how to communicate distress in subtle ways could make a real difference in safety. Charlotte felt a sense of purpose in telling her story, not to seek attention, but to encourage others to remain vigilant and proactive in potentially dangerous situations. Word of the incident quickly spread through local news channels and social media. Charlotte's story, the silent plea for help, and the guard's decisive action captured the attention of many. People were inspired by her courage, her composure under pressure, and the professionalism of the guard. Charlotte found herself reflecting on how remarkable it was that a combination of quick thinking, training, and awareness could prevent a dangerous situation from escalating. She felt a quiet sense of pride and a strong desire to share the lessons she had learned. As the day continued, Charlotte took some time to visit the royal gardens again, though she moved more cautiously this time. The beauty of the surroundings, the fountains, the statues, the perfectly trimmed hedges, was still captivating, but her mind remained alert. She observed the visitors around her, noting their behavior and interactions, understanding now more than ever how important it was to be aware of one's environment. Every detail mattered, from the smallest movement to the most subtle gesture. Charlotte felt that this awareness was a gift she had discovered under intense circumstances. Later, Charlotte reflected on her emotions and the personal growth that had come from the experience. Fear had dominated the first part of the van ride, but by acting calmly and deliberately, she had turned a potentially frightening situation into a story of courage and teamwork. She realized that life could present unexpected challenges at any moment, and being prepared, aware, and composed could be the difference between danger and safety. Charlotte felt grateful for the reminder that inner strength often emerges in moments of vulnerability. Charlotte also thought about the role of bystanders and how important it was that the guard had noticed her signals. She understood that safety was not only the responsibility of trained professionals, but also a shared effort between those in distress and those who can respond. Her own silent communication had been crucial, but it had only worked because someone trained and alert was paying attention. Charlotte felt inspired to share this understanding with friends, family, and future travelers, hoping that her experience might help others recognize the importance of vigilance and quick response. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the royal grounds, Charlotte felt a sense of closure. The immediate danger had passed, the driver was being dealt with by authorities, and the crowd had dispersed. She had survived an intense and frightening experience, but she had done so with composure, awareness, and courage. Charlotte knew that she had grown stronger through this ordeal, learning valuable lessons about trust, preparedness, and the power of clear communication. Her thoughts returned once more to the guard who had saved her. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for his bravery and skill, knowing that his intervention had been the turning point in the story. She realized that heroes often appear quietly, taking decisive action without expectation of recognition, and that their presence can make all the difference. Charlotte silently thanked him in her mind, appreciating the rare combination of skill, courage, and dedication that had ensured her safety. In the days that followed, Charlotte reflected on the incident repeatedly. She wrote in her notebook, recounting the events in detail, capturing her emotions, her thoughts, and the lessons she had learned. She described the importance of observation, the strategies she had used to signal for help, and the relief of seeing the guard act so decisively. Through writing, she processed the experience, turning fear into understanding and anxiety into empowerment. Charlotte knew that this experience would remain a defining moment in her life. Charlotte also spoke with her family and friends about what had happened. They listened intently, expressing concern, relief, and admiration for her composure and courage. She explained how small, deliberate actions, combined with the help of trained professionals, could prevent dangerous situations from escalating. Her family felt proud of her calmness and awareness, and Charlotte felt comforted by their support. She understood that sharing her story could help others, creating awareness about safety, observation, and the power of quick thinking in emergencies. As she reflected further, Charlotte realized that the experience had given her a new perspective on life. She understood the fragility of safety, the importance of preparedness, and the value of paying attention to subtle cues in one's surroundings. More than that, she felt a deep respect for the people whose training and dedication allowed them to protect others, often without recognition. Charlotte recognized that courage could take many forms, from silent observation to decisive intervention, and that both were equally important in ensuring safety. By the end of the day, Charlotte felt a sense of peace. The royal grounds, once a backdrop for tension and fear, now felt like a place of reflection and growth. She walked slowly, taking in the gardens, the fountains, and the statues, appreciating the beauty around her while acknowledging the lessons she had learned. Charlotte felt stronger, more aware, and deeply grateful for the people who had helped ensure her safety. The experience had been frightening, yes, but it had also been transformative, teaching her the value of courage, observation, and decisive action. Charlotte left the royal grounds that evening with a mixture of relief, empowerment, and hope. She knew that the incident had changed her, not in a way that made her fearful, but in a way that made her wiser and more aware. She had survived a potentially dangerous situation through vigilance, silent communication, and the bravery of a royal guard. Charlotte understood that safety was a shared responsibility, and that quick thinking, preparation, and courage could turn fear into triumph. She felt ready to carry these lessons into her daily life, confident in her ability to stay aware, act decisively, and appreciate the quiet heroism of those who protect others.